Kukutana kwetu mara ya kwanza haikuwa kitu rahisi. Kila mtu pia hiyo hofu mlikuwa naye, hata sisi tulikuwa naye pia. Huyu mtu tukikutana naye tutaambiana nini? Tutasema nini? Na kwa ukweli wakati tulikutana, tulikunywa chai karibu dakika 45, kuna mtu anaongea, tunakunywa tu chai.
It took 19 hours and it was not easy, as the president will explain to you later, when we began, because we had called each other all sorts of names. And eventually, after all that long deliberations, we agreed that we now have something that we can actually put together.
Many thanks for staying with us on Newsnight on this 3rd anniversary of the Handshake. Just before the break, quite some interesting discussion with Senator Abshiro Halake, Chairperson, Center for Multi-Party Democracy, Honorable Martha Karua, na Kenya Party leader who is joining us virtually, and Charles Kanjama, an advocate of the High Court. We've gotten a lot of your feedback, which I'll read now before we talk about the future of our political dispensation, because the next target, or what we're seeing moving forward, will be campaigns once the IBC gives the way forward. Pro or against BBI, and then after that a referendum, and then what happens next. That's what I want to hear from my panelists. What are their projections? But before that, this is what Kenyans are saying tonight. Here's your feedback. Alex Mayore says, what's the strategic plan for Linda Katiba to educate Kenyans in the grassroots why they should vote no? Why doesn't the team come up with its own proposals? Okay, I'll give Honorable Karua a chance to respond to that. Edwin Waithaka says, desperation and constitutional surgery, mutilation time has finally beckoned. We're being taken to archaic, pre-colonial, like rule, while the masses stare as if all is well. Will one time wake up to a sad reality that the constitutional coup has succeeded? All right, here's another tweet. This one, Kauka Maben, you talked of pre-election chaos. What we've seen in Matungu, Kabuchai and London Ward last week is but a signal towards the bigger chaos next year if the BBI continues to exclude some members. Why do we vote for a document which has been presumably termed rigid and unchangeable? Okay, so another perspective there. Let's see what else we have. R. Kurunzi says, the problem we have in Kenya is that politicians care more for their fellow politicians than for the common mwananchi. You see, like these two politicians are arguing about the fate of 4 individuals, not about millions of Kenyans who are jobless now. Kenyans should reject BBI is what Kurunzi says. I don't know which 2 politicians you're referring to. I don't know if it's one. Okay, we'll leave it to your imagination. Charles Chelimo, the structure of the government BBI is rooting for is the one we had prior to 2010. Are we now saying the problems we saw in the executive then have now fizzled out? Okay, and maybe Charles Kanjama, you can weigh in a bit on that. And Davis Kipto, BBI, good document for the political class, bad document for the common mwananchi. So those are some of the views given on SMS. Let me read one. Jackson from Utawala says, it's true we need electoral reforms. Where was Honorable Karua when BBI task force was crisscrossing the country? She would have given her views there. I believe she did make a presentation, but she'll have a chance to respond to that. And then someone says, the presidential system seems to have failed the country, where only 2 take it all away. If your guests cannot see that, then they don't live in Kenya. Okay, Advocate Kanjama, let me start with you on this one. Martha Karua raised an interesting point. She said, where is the legality of the Handshake BBI process as per our current laws? Could there be a way in which you could justify their legality at this time from a legal perspective? Where are we with that? And I think there's another question that was had some legal aspect to it that you can tackle as well.
Wahiga, I'm looking forward to tackling some of the issues regarding the content of BBI, but I'll start by dealing with the question of the process. There are court cases that are currently ongoing. There is a 5-judge bench that will be sitting next week, and some of the questions they'll be dealing with are questions regarding the process. And if I can be candid, as someone who has observed the process from the beginning, the process is quite well-intentioned. It started as an outcome to deal with a crisis a political crisis that we had in 2017-2018. But sometimes the government becomes rather ham-handed, rather forceful, bends the laws when they find the law or the principles in the constitution may create obstacles. And the mentality sometimes of people in government is there are too many obstacles being created by the courts, by parliament through its laws, by regulations. If we can dodge a few of them for purposes of efficiency, the better. So definitely there are concerns about the process in terms of if it is a government process, it is using public resources. Is a popular initiative the proper route? And of course, the fundamental difference between the popular initiative route and the parliamentary route is that in the popular initiative route, that package of reforms that has been proposed by the promoters cannot be amended. You cannot remove anything that you consider a poison pill. You take it or leave it. One of the questions that is going to be addressed in court is whether you can have multiple questions in the referendum, so that you package together the reforms on Prime Minister, you package the reforms on a judiciary ombudsman, so that if you like the Prime Minister reform but you don't like the change for judiciary ombudsman, you can vote no for one, vote yes for the other. But currently, the recommendation of the Office of the Attorney General is that it will be one referendum question. IBC will make the final decision. In a parliamentary system, the members of parliament can debate. They can make changes. They can even decide that the bill be withdrawn so that a new bill be brought with amendments, so that they can keep refining and improving the process. So I think the fundamental difference between the parliamentary and the popular initiative is that in the parliamentary initiative, you can give the representatives of the people, the members of parliament, the opportunity to further panel beat and improve the constitutional amendment bill. While in this particular case, Parliament is being told, take it or leave it. There is another key issue that I think on the process is worth bringing out. Under a parliamentary process, it is prescribed that there must be 3 months between the first reading and the second reading of a constitutional amendment bill, so that for the members of Parliament to go and seek the views of Kenyans, and if they need to make changes, to make the changes having been informed by those views. I think the approach that is being taken by Parliament under the current initiative is that they don't think they need to give those 3 months. What is the point? They'll do very quick public participation because they cannot change the bill. It's either take it or leave it. So those are some of the issues that I've had being raised by the Linda Katiba group. The group that supports the BBI process through popular initiative, on the other hand, is saying that if we have 1 million signatures, Kenyans have supported the bill. If a majority of the county assemblies have approved the bill, if we'll go to a referendum, why don't we allow the people to decide? And it is from that point that I have had this case brought in court asking, do we even have a proper process of validating the signatures? If IBC admits that they did not verify the signatures, they say they did not have the ability to verify the signatures because they don't have a signature database, but there is such a database with the registrar of persons. Did the county assemblies have freedom, or were they put under political pressure and other forms of intimidation to pass the bill? So, of course, the argument of popular initiative is that the people are the ones deciding. Were they given an opportunity to interrogate the bill before they endorsed their signatures on the bill? So both sides are making arguments that seem persuasive at the beginning. And for the church leaders, I know, because I've been chair of Kenya Christian Professionals Forum recently, they have been asking, last year when the BBI bills came out, can we dialogue a bit more? I saw the statement by the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops, by the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya, by the National Council of Churches of Kenya, by other stakeholders. The Muslims also made similar comments. They said, can't we dialogue a bit more? But the political leader said, no, we are in a hurry. we don't have the luxury of time. And so they lost an opportunity there. And the question now is, should we proceed to the referendum so that we give a straight up or down vote, or is there still opportunity to improve the process?
Senator, do you have a response to that?
Waiga, you know, just listening in, of course, the popular initiative, there's a reason why BBI has become urgent. The urgency of this matter, as much as somebody would say, oh, maybe it's being pushed through by politicians who want to give themselves political seats, is that every 5 years, this bloodbath after elections. So again, we don't have the luxury of time to just continue dialoguing and doing all these things. Sometimes that could be the reason why perhaps the urgency is being witnessed here. But that I'm not saying that is precisely what it is. But it's time bound, because if you're trying to mitigate a risk of violence, for instance, or if you're trying to mitigate a risk of electoral, malpractices and things like that, perhaps that could be the reason. But that having been said, through popular initiative, once the Houses of Parliament, let's say you've put a signature on it, then where is the burden of proof to prove that I was under duress, right? Because a lot of people, by the time actually the signatures that were taken to IEBC were like 4 million or 5 million thereabouts, right? So again, we can't just talk for people. If all those 5 million people, 4 million people that put their signatures then came to tell us that I was, a gun was put to my head to put my signature, but that's not the case. And we know it. There's so many people who support BBI. There are regions that feel like BBI is the only way that they can feel part of this country and that they can get inclusivity that has been a mirage for them since independence. And we know it. So again, I know it can be good for our points of view and our argument, but I wouldn't jump to say that IBC doesn't have a way of verifying the signatures, or that the people who put their signatures were under duress. Because we know parts of this country that were so disenfranchised, were so disgruntled, that they really wanted even to secede. And that region was the #1 region that, both in terms of their county assemblies, as well as their signatures, were the first regions that really came in with these things. So again, they must count for something as well. So I don't totally agree that it was under duress, really.
Senator, as you can see clearly from the feedback we're getting, there are a lot of divergent views about where we are as a country and where the BBI is. I'm sure there are divergent views in the political parties that support the organization you represent, the CMD.
Yes.
As chair, how can you ensure that the best methods of public participation and engagement moving forward on this BBI process or any other constitutional process we will have are carried out in the short time that we have and moving forward?
You're right. Actually, we have done that at CMD, both at the steering committee of the Center for Multi-Party Democracy and the Oversight Board. We made a strategic decision not to take any sides. But what we've done along the way, we've been providing platforms for our political
Even though
parties.
I put you in a difficult place tonight when I ask you questions that force you to speak as from the political party that you represent.
I know, but that's fine, because that is the balance I have to continue to walk. So what we've done at Center for Multi-Party Democracy, we've always created platforms for our parties. Our parties have come on board each time. The first time there was the task force, the initial task force, we brought them all together. They dialogued, they told us what we need to do, and we went to each of the political parties that invited us to input into their memoranda. We made sure that we facilitated that process. We made sure there was dialogue around that. Made sure there was dialogue around that for women, for PWDs, and for other constituents that really are under our umbrella. So what we've done is to provide, and we are a dialogue platform anyway, so that's our mandate, and we've tried to do that without then, enforcing the view of the chairperson, and they understood that the chairperson comes from a certain political party, has certain political, affiliations, and belongs to a certain coalition and things like that. But we provided platform, we provided support to each political party to create their own memorandum, which they submitted to the late Haji's, may God rest his soul in peace.
Okay.
Yeah.
Honorable Karua, let's now talk about the way forward. According to recommendations about IEBC operations, the IEBC should have been ready for preparations for the next election or referendum should have started at least 2 years before. Right now, with a couple of months to the referendum, if the timelines are what political players are telling us is true, the IEBC still doesn't look fully ready to handle an all-out sort of across-the-country voting process. What do you see? What do you project? What do you expect should a referendum happen? And what would the future look like if the BBI passes or if it doesn't? What are your estimates as a veteran politician, Honorable Karua?
To begin with, the IEBC has to be ready to change its ways, the way it manages the elections. Mm-hmm. It must sit down with stakeholders, both at the national and the county levels, to plan the elections. This is what is envisaged by Article 10 on public participation. It is what is envisaged by Article 86 on transparency and accountability. If the IEBC seeks to do that, then we can be able to have a free and fair referendum. But if IEBC agrees to co-option by the drivers of BBI, then we will have a referendum we may not believe in. And it is important that we prepare ourselves for a free and fair referendum as a precursor to the 2022 general elections. So I think it's incumbent on the IEBC and the stakeholders to engage, and especially the two sides, those who are for and those who are against the BBI.
Honorable Karua, a question that keeps...
Somebody asked whether I...
Yes, go ahead and respond.
I presented views to the committee. Yes, I did, round one. We did a Snack Kenya, and part of our presentation was to ask that the initiators of the BBI should open up to accommodate the rest of Kenyans, because they only selected members from the former Prime Minister's party or from his list and from the President's list. We were telling them, you may be the two largest parties, but Kenya is bigger than you. Open for civil society, for political parties under the umbrella of CMD. Open up for the rest of Kenyans. Let it be about Kenyans and Kenya, not just about the two of you. They failed to open up, and for me, the process was poisoned from the beginning. And therefore, it is not a process that merits the support of Kenyans.
Honorable Karua, your stand on the upcoming referendum, should it happen, is very clear. But many Kenyans, and that's some feedback that we're getting tonight, are asking, is her name going to be on the ballot paper, the presidential ballot paper in 2022? What's your response to that?
I am campaigning to be Governor Kirinyaga.
Okay.
I am ready, able, and willing to serve Kenyans in that capacity, because serving Kirinyaga is serving Kenya.
Okay, so those who had wished that you aspire for a higher seat should hold their horses?
I haven't had them yet.
Okay. Okay. Charles Kanjama, and maybe we will need to have another discussion on the actual contents of the Constitution Amendment Bill, from what it speaks in regards to corruption, expeditious investigations, to the increase in the number of constituencies, to the addition of a Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Ministers, and so forth. But because we are talking about the electoral process, and Honorable Karua has raised questions about that, because you studied the Constitution Amendment Bill 2020, is there anything there that gives you confidence that once passed, there could be a more transparent electoral process, or do you have questions about why certain aspects may not have been included in that bill?
The attempt of BBI to deal with the question of elections management through the elections management body became a cropper after there was widespread criticism that originated, among other people, in the office of the deputy president at Bomas. Remember Honorable Ruto asking why football players are going to again choose the referee, because the proposal of BBI was to have an IBC with 7 members of the commission, 4 of whom would be appointed by political parties. So 1 month later, when BBI version 3 was released, together with the collection of signature initiation process, those proposals were removed. So BBI has actually, as currently framed, not made any specific recommendation regarding the elections management body or the elections management process. What they have done is they have come up with proposals regarding the positions that people can vie for. They have dealt with the criticism that some women political leaders had about the 2/3 gender rule by introducing the same formula that was in the county assemblies for top-up of gender seats to the National Assembly. That top-up might generate an additional 100, 120, 140 MP seats. They have dealt with the criticism that cabinet secretaries were not sufficiently answerable to Parliament by converting them from cabinet secretaries to cabinet ministers who will automatically be members of Parliament. However, when you read the exact wording of the bill, it does not prescribe where the cabinet ministers will come from. So the president can either appoint them from among MPs who've been elected, or he can appoint them from anywhere else. However, the current situation has a provision whereby cabinet secretaries are vetted by the National Assembly. That has been removed. And there's also been introduction of an additional 21 assistant ministers. So one of the concerns is the president will now have the possibility of nominating and appointing 42 members of Parliament without any form of vetting. Even President Daniel Moi, in his heydays, would appoint 12. These are 42 to support the majority of the president's party. These are some of the proposals that have been made on the elections management system. There had been a concern that in the Senate, the nominated women senators were not effective enough because they are not representing counties. This has been addressed by ensuring that each of the 47 counties will have 2 senators going forward, both elected, 1 male, 1 female, so that there's going to be equality at the level of the Senate. On issues that had been raised by some of the members of civil society that Honorable Martha Karua has alluded to, about transparency, requiring the elections management body to disclose more information and not giving that job to the election petitioner in court, have not been addressed in in the BBI bill. So when I give an overall analysis, I would say that the issues that resulted in loss of confidence by ODM after the 2017 election, loss of confidence in the ability of the court to give them a robust determination, loss of confidence in IBC to be fair to them, loss of confidence in the police and the security actors to be impartial. Those issues, to be honest and to be candid to Kenyans, have not been addressed in the BBI bill.
Okay.
In fact, the concern is that part of the independence of the of the police service, which is secured by giving the National Police Service Commission some powers for hiring and firing and not putting them in the Inspector General of Police, has been diluted because the Inspector General of Police has now been given, in addition to his independent command of the police, the power to hire and fire. These are some of the substantive issues that may touch on elections that we will need to deliberate in the coming days.
Okay, and that's why we will definitely have a session dedicated solely to analysis of the Constitutional Amendment Bill 2020. In the interest of time, I'm going to have to get final thoughts from each of you. Let me start with you, Senator Halake. I know you may have one or a reaction. It has to be brief, and then you tell us this. On this 3rd anniversary of the handshake, at least for another couple of minutes or so, how has it affected Kenya's democracy? One of the leading democracies in Africa, I would say. How has the handshake affected Kenya's democracy? Briefly, please, with your final comments on that.
Thank you very much. Let me just quickly point out that the Constitution of Kenya 2010 is a very robust and dynamic one, and it's been accepted by all, including ourselves, and that's the reason why, of course, then we're also jittery to let it go or to perhaps have it changed. So if there was something within the BBI that doesn't address some of these issues, then we still have a backup of the Constitution, because remember, the changes are only applicable to parts of the proposals, not if the proposal doesn't, if there's no specific proposal, then the Constitution of Kenya 2010 remains the way it is and shall be implemented as is. So I think for Kenyans, I'd like to say not to worry if perhaps there's a place that hasn't been touched on. It means that then the Constitution remains the way it is and will continue to serve us. With regards to your last question, Waiga, you were asking about...
Basically, in your view, generally, how has the handshake affected Kenya's democracy, having looked at the 3 years, briefly?
Yeah. I think there are certain downsides of the handshake. I'm not going to sit and think that it was all just perfect. In terms of perhaps in Parliament where I sit, the robustness of the opposition to certain government positions was diluted for sure, because then there was a situation where perhaps we didn't have the pushback that an opposition, a strong opposition, was going to give to certain things, perhaps that would have made, debate more robust and perhaps value for the outcomes that we would have wanted as a country. But that being said, we'll have to look at this vis-a-vis what it was that we mitigated in terms of the violence that we were trying to mitigate and in terms of the greater good. So again, in life, it's give and take, and the consensus had certain, democratic downs, perhaps, where the level of oversight, perhaps, could have been compromised in certain cases. But overall, I think the handshake was a good thing, because before we even go to oversighting and other lower level initiatives, we must first of all hold our country's integrity together and have a country which we can oversight.
Honorable Karua, as you give us your last comment, you can also respond to that question. In what ways, in your view, did the handshake affect, alter or impact Kenya's democracy?
It has distorted our democracy. The watchdog role of the minority party in Parliament has been distorted, and the minority party has become the greatest defender and articulator of government policies. It has brought intolerance and tension. All we hear of daily is fights of the two sides of Jubilee, one side with the president and his ally, the former prime minister, the other side with the deputy president and those who support him. If BBI was to unite, then it has affected the country by bringing too much tension. And I'm saying to the president and to the former prime minister, it is not too late to withdraw this, rethink, and let us move forward as a united nation, as a united country. And for the president, that his legacy should not be the person who destroyed the democratic gains that are in our constitution. We have seen a clawback on the right to assembly, especially of those people perceived to be anti-BBI. We have seen the return of tear gas. And finally, we have seen blatant refusal to let Kenyans have access to the BBI document so that they can discuss from a point of information. We've seen the emasculation of Parliament, of the county assemblies, where even in the National Parliament, the appointments of chairs of committee, leaders of the various positions are being appointed directly from State House. There is a merger of the three institutions, and BBI proposes to directly chip at the independence of the judiciary through the judicial ombudsman. So it is bad for our democracy, and it is time to rethink.
Okay, thank you so much, Honorable Karua. And finally, Wakili Kanjama, in about a minute, you're the unlucky one who wraps this up for us. Its effect on the state of our democracy, the handshake that is?
Let me start by reflecting on a bit of our history. One day, Wahiga in 1964, Martin Shikuku found himself as a solitary member of the opposition, KADU, in the parliament benches, when all the rest of KADU had crossed over to the government side. And they prevailed upon him to also defect and join government. They said national unity required that he does so. Years later, the conversion of Kenya into a de facto one-party state bore very bitter fruits of accumulation of presidential power. One day in 1982, in the month of June, the government of the day introduced a bill to convert Kenya into a de jure one-party state. They went through the first reading, the second reading, the committee stage, the reporting stage, and the third reading. And that constitutional amendment bill passed, and Kenya became a one-party state within one day. And the bitter fruits of that very rushed process, the erosion of the democratic sensibility of the people of Kenya, the damage to our constitutionalism and its institutions was felt in 1987 with the Q voting, in 1988 when they removed security of tenure for judges, and so on. And that is what gave rise to the process that began with the 1992 Constitutional Amendment Bill to reintroduce multi-party democracy and to bring back the fruits of a true republican democracy. What am I saying? I'm saying that this process that has begun with noble intentions. In 1964, it was the noble intention of unity in Kenya. This process that is begun with noble intentions under the Building Bridges Initiative and the Handshake to bring peace has a similar risk, has a similar danger, that the constitution that Kenyans fought hard for in terms of leveling democratic space, and in 2010 majority of Kenyans supported that current constitution, those institutions risk being damaged. 2 years ago, when the Law Society of Kenya had a debate in its annual conference with over 1,000 lawyers on the question, and this was a fundamental question: is the deficit in our constitution a deficit of implementation, or is it a deficit of design? In other words, do we need to change the constitution, or what we need to do is to implement it better? I was quite surprised to see the almost unanimous conclusion of the lawyers, you could say the technicians of the law in the constitution, that what we really needed as a country was implementation. My worry, my fear, is that as we rush through the process of the Building Bridges Initiative, yes, we are going to improve certain parts of the Constitution, there is no doubt. We are going to harm other parts of the Constitution, there is no doubt about that either. They are both sweeteners and poison pills. But the question is, are we going to harm the foundations in a way in which they will be unable to sustain that superstructure that is above? This is a question I want to leave Kenyans with. And I ask Kenyans to reflect, the political players, all the stakeholders of the system. Is this the best solution for Kenyans? Is it too late to pause, to think, to discuss, and to agree on what is best for Kenyans?
And I think that's where we are going to leave it. What a sober but enlightening discussion that we've had. I want to thank each of my guests for being a part of this, and of course everyone who sent in feedback. Speaking of feedback, Nick Salat, man who needs no introduction, says, in Senator Halake, KANU has found a brilliant, shrewd and articulate leader who inspires our brilliance and holds the bull by its horns if and when need be. Kudos. Okay, Senator Halake, that's for you. Faith Njeru says, Martha Karua, you're a strong and able leader leader. Your level is beyond county. You should be vying to lead the republic. You just told Wahiga that you have not heard from those who want you to go for the presidency. Here I am. I don't know what your response is to that. You can, it's Faith M. Njeru on Twitter. You said you hadn't heard from anyone. To each of my guests,